Ladies and gentlemen, today we are gathered here to celebrate and to be happy together with Britain, Canada, Australia, and Portugal, who have finally remembered that Palestine exists. Leaders have issued solemn statements, flags have waved, and we have seen the headlines. Oh my, screaming. This is historic. Sounds grand. But let's not pretend that it rewrites the reality on the ground. And here is the question that actually matters. When a government says we recognize Palestine, does a checkpoint disappear? Do bombs stop falling on a sovereign nation? Or is this just the world's favorite hobby, the moral karaoke, singing about justice while the house is still on fire? Now stay with me. By the end of this episode, you will know what recognition really changes, where Africa stands, who's blocking the door at the UN, and why some Western leaders only discover courage after a trend goes viral. Go TikTok. Go X. Okay, now let's roll back the tape back to 1988. Why? Because this is where the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, declares state of Palestine. Now, most of Africa, Asia, and Latin America said, we see you, bro. Congrats. You've made it. Karibu sana. The UN starts using Palestine instead of PLO. That's not yesterday. That's decades of the global south doing the obvious, while the global north stared at the ceiling. Like, yo, what are you guys talking about? Us in the global south, you are celebrating and welcoming Palestine. Welcome to the table. Congratulations. Okay? Now come in 2012. The UN General Assembly, that's basically the parliament of the UN, made up of all 193 member countries. Each country, big or small, gets one equal vote. So the US and a tiny island nation both carry the same weight when they press that button. Okay? When they are voting, unless a veto power is utilized, but we'll come to that. So the UN upgrades Palestine to a non-member observer state. What? Anyway, it's okay. So that basically means that Palestine is treated like a state for speeches, treaties, and joining groups, but without the full voting rights that official member states enjoy. Think of it as having a seat at the big table, but no button to push when the votes are being counted or are to be counted. They can't vote. Now, the vote that brought Palestine in, 138 were in favor, and these were mostly African. And out of Africa's 54 nations, 52 have already recognized Palestine. Only Cameroon and Eritrea hold back. I don't know why. Making Africa one of the strongest regional blocs behind Palestinian statehood. Now, Asian, Latin America, all right, so we are talking about the global south and then the Arab states. 9 were actually against. That is the US. It's not a surprise, eh? Israel, of course. The bullies, they dropped the fucking bombs. Okay, Canada, Czech Republic, Panama, and small Pacific allies like Palau, Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and Nauru. Now, there were 41 abstentions, including, this will not surprise you, big European players like the UK, Germany, who could not commit either way. Okay? The short of it is that the world said yes. A small club said no. And a larger club said, we are too shy. I abstain. I don't want to, so I'll just look the other way. Now that status opened legal doors for Palestine when the votes were in. And yes, congrats to Palestine. It opened doors. In plain terms, Palestine could now sign international agreements. Palestine could join global clubs and even take cases to the world's courts like the ICC. It's like finally getting the right to hire a lawyer and enter the courtroom instead of just shouting from the corridors. Our rights, haki yetu. Okay? But on the ground, Israel's military control of the West Bank and blockade of Gaza stayed firmly in place. Daily life of Palestinians, from checkpoints to land grabs, remained the same despite the new diplomatic titles. Paper changed, but power did not. Now come to 2024. The Security Council finally votes on full UN membership for Palestine. The result? This is how they voted. 12 said yes. Let them come in, including France, Japan, and most African and Latin American. As always, the Global South was there championing for Palestine. 2 members abstained. Again, you will not be surprised that the UK and Switzerland abstained. And 1 said no, which is, of course, drumroll. The United States said no, which used its veto power. Now, you know how it goes. A veto at the UN Security Council is like a superpower's kill switch. If any of the 5 permanent members, that is the US, the UK, France, Russia, or even China, if they hit that veto power, the resolution dies instantly, instantaneous death. No matter how many other countries voted yes. In simple terms, almost everyone agreed. 2 countries sat on the fence. And 1 powerful player killed the whole thing and said, you know what, your votes don't matter. Get out of here with that veto. And in the same year, I think we all remember this, Hamas launched a large-scale terror attack on Israel, sparking war in Gaza. That assault, brutal and shocking, and we condemn it. It was condemned worldwide. But many analysts link its timing to decades of blockade, occupation, and the stalled statehood bid. In other words, when peaceful paths keep hitting veto walls, some groups turn to violence with very catastrophic results for civilians on both sides. Now let's come to 2025. We have the Western wave. We are celebrating. The headlines are there that the UK, Canada, Australia, Portugal have finally recognized Palestine in coordinated fashion around the UN week. It's still happening, ain't it? Sindio? Namna gani? Yes, it's still happening. So more allies line up. This is real geopolitics, not just vibes and inshallah. Is it substance or theater? Let's ask ourselves that question. And here's what the Western coverage keeps forgetting, that Africa has backed Palestine statehood for decades. Most African states recognized Palestine long before anyone in London discovered a conscience. If they have any, I don't know. In UN votes, Africa is the backbone of those giant majorities that you keep seeing. That 2012 landslide, heavily carried by Africa, Asia, Latin America. The 2024 and 2025 showdowns, again, Africa votes yes, while great powers play veto and others sit on the fence. Mandela said it straight. Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians. Africa didn't wait for a green light from anyone. The world just pretended not to hear until the usual amplifiers spoke. That's not diplomacy, that's selective hearing. But let's be practical, okay? So now that they have recognized Palestine, at least they get some legal leverage, okay? So the recognition plus the 2012 UN upgrades lets Palestine join treaties and pursue cases at bodies like the ICC. You and I, let's not kid ourselves. We know that's in theory. But anyway, in whatever way that is big, okay? It creates risk for officials who think international law is optional. But here's the catch. Some of the most powerful players, this is where I'm saying it's to some point is also theoretical, because we have powerful players like the US, Israel, even Russia, who have refused the ICC or pulled out when it suits them. And who dares drag them in? Can you dare drag Putin, the Kremlin? Can you dare drag the US, saying, you committed crimes against humanity, go to International Criminal Court? Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, the International Criminal Court is just full of Africans. And that's the problem. For weaker states and individuals without powerful shields, this legal leverage can bite. For the big guys with nukes or vetoes, it often ends up looking great on paper and toothless in practice. Now, since we're still being real and looking at the theoretical side of it, this move or the recognition gives Palestine diplomatic muscle, meaning embassies get to open, ambassadors get exchanged. We can have a Palestinian ambassador here, Palestinian ambassador there. Bilateral deals become normal again, but you're saying we're discussing theory, eh? And here's the reality check. At the same time, Israel is flattening parts of Gaza And Netanyahu is openly threatening that a Palestinian state will never be established west of the Jordan. So while the diplomacy looks neat on paper, the military bulldozer keeps rolling. That gap between ink on treaties and blood on the ground is a contradiction that we are stuck with right now. Well, the other thing that we might celebrate is that there is multilateral momentum. That one we cannot deny. And in simple terms is that the UN's General Assembly, where all countries vote equally, showed big support. Again, right? We have always been in support. In May 2024, they basically told the Security Council, come on, give Palestine full membership, and even gave Palestine extra privilege at the UN starting September 2024. That shows most of the world is on board, even if the powerful veto-wielding countries keep frowning and blocking the move. Now, what are the limits? Recognition in itself does not dismantle a single checkpoint. We're talking about those checkpoints in Palestine. It does not stop a single airstrike. It doesn't reverse a single land grab by itself. You all can see what's happening between Israel and Palestine. It's a key in the legal door, not a bulldozer removing the wall. So anyone selling it as an instant liberation, to be honest, is selling you a TED Talk. The UK stood up and said, we recognize Palestine to keep the two-state solution alive. Canada added, we recognize, and no, this is not some reward for terrorism. Australia chimed in, basically copying what Canada's script looked like, word for word. And Portugal declared, two-state is the only path. Hamas must have no control. 4 countries, 1 choir, all harmonizing right before UN week. The twist? These aren't random players. They are America's closest pals. So imagine the loyal sidekicks finally telling the superhero, hey mate, maybe you're the problem. That's why it hits different. Not because the lines are fresh, but because the voices are. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu has obviously fumed and has called it a huge reward for terrorism and doubled down that a Palestinian state will not be established west of the Jordan. Some of his ministers even dangled annexation as punishment, like saying, you recognize Palestine? Fine, we'll just shrink it and make it smaller. Meanwhile, in Washington, officials have rolled their eyes and muttered about performative gestures, while conveniently forgetting they are the ones vetoing a 12-1 Security Council vote. So recognition is called empty theater. But blocking a nearly unanimous vote with 1 veto isn't. Come on, America. Come on, Washington. The bottom line of all this is that when London, Ottawa, Canberra, and Lisbon move, they are not inventing morality. They're just catching up to the global south, finally admitting the obvious. And every time they do, Israel's diplomatic comfort zone shrinks, and that lonely veto looks even lonelier. Honestly, recognition matters. But if it's going to be more than a fancy press release, it's going to need teeth that people can actually feel. Sanctions for illegal settlements. If Israel keeps building where it shouldn't, hit them with penalties that actually sting. Without consequences, nothing changes. Let's have arms conditions, which are already there. Actually, they need to be enforced. Put it this way, if a country wants to keep buying weapons, it has to play by the rules. It has to play by the rules. If you break the rules, basically no weapons for you. Simple. We should keep the UN track hot. That means this issue should be dragged. It should be talked about. We shouldn't be quiet. Every now and then, if there's nothing that's happening, the issue should be back to the UN floor, so that the whole world sees when one country blocks 190 others. Shame is also a tool, honestly. Let us see them. Let us name them. Let us bring these issues back and back and back till action is finally taken and justice prevails. Finally, African and Global South leadership. Can we have that? Can we actually see leadership from the Global South? Because we are seeing them as the majority. They are there. They are turning up. They are not sitting on the fence. But for them to have voices that matter, I really wonder if it is practical. Well, maybe not tomorrow morning. Honestly, it would be about fairness. Africa and the Global South have backed Palestine for decades, yet they have often been treated like extras in a movie where the West hogs the camera. The idea here is simple. Instead of just clapping from the back row, let them actually hold the mic and shape the script. Will it flip global politics overnight? No, but it forces the conversation that their voices actually matter just as much as Washington's veto pen. So do that, and recognition stops being a press conference and starts being policy. Recognition is not justice. It's only a first step in a marathon that Palestinians have been forced to run barefoot for decades. Africa saw the truth in 1988, the UN stamped it in 2012, and in 2024, the Security Council almost wrote it into law until a single veto killed it. In 2025, a few Western countries have finally woken up. But statements and headlines aren't the finish line. Real recognition, let's hammer this in, is when a Palestinian can cross a checkpoint without fear. Is when a Palestinian can farm land without bulldozers waiting and raise children without bombs overhead. Until that day, clap if you must, but save your loudest applause for when justice, not just recognition, finally arrives. This has been Katiba Ninja. See you on the next one.